Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this next session on Kraftshala Live. My name is Varun Sethia, and this series has been created to help you upskill in marketing. Today, we're going to be joined very shortly by Arvind Bhandari, who's the Director for Nutrition for Nestlé in South Asia. And we're going to be talking about creating impactful communication. We're going to be Arvind is going to be joining us in the next couple of minutes or so. He's had a personal emergency, and we're very grateful that he's been able to manage to take out time to join us. In the meantime, I'll share a couple of updates with you on the series itself. So allow me a second. Awesome. So we do these sessions every Tuesday at 7 o'clock. The next session is going to be on YouTube ads, and that's going to be taken by Ishu. He's going to be talking a little bit about how to use YouTube effectively. There's a lot of there's a lot of information out there about how best to effectively use YouTube. What we're going to be talking about in that session essentially is how to connect the brand goals to some of the new things that YouTube has introduced in order to optimize the campaign to its fullest potential. Yeah, so that's there. And then obviously lots of resources that are going to be coming up on our Instagram channel as well. They're going to be posted in some cases on YouTube as well. So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done that. And go ahead and subscribe to Instagram as well. Okay. So we're just going to wait in for a couple of minutes for Arvind before he can join in. And as soon as he comes in, we're going to start in. My sense is he should be here in the next 2 to 3 minutes. Yeah. So I thank you for your patience.
Open the PowerPoint presentation.
This is slide.
Well taken. Hi, Varun.
Arvind, so we're live here with our
Hello,
audience. Varun. Hey, are you good to get started? We're very grateful first up that
Yeah,
you've.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so we'll start. Yeah.
Yes, we'll start. Just give me a second. What I'll do up front is I wanted to play that video that we discussed about.
Sure.
As some of you know, Arvind has written a book called Pragmarketism, and today's discussion is derived from the ideas that Arvind has talked about in this book as well. So let me give you a short video on that, and then we get to the discussion.
Hello, I'm Arvind.
Hi, I'm Trupti.
We are here to tell you what prompted us to write Pragmatism. We found 3 gaps in marketing. First, our MBA education is based on Western frameworks and Western examples. Is it truly relevant for the billion Indian consumers steeped in their own cultural reality? Second, theoreticians, not practitioners, have written most of these books. Have they adequately captured the challenges and opportunities a marketer faces in the real world? Third, digital is evolving the consumers rapidly. Today, modernity is fusing with tradition. How do the rules of classical marketing apply on this new digital world?
Which is why we wrote Pragmaketism, Pragmatic Marketing Insights for Winning the Indian Consumer. This book captures our collective experience of 45 years across companies like Nestlé, Pepsi, ITC, GSK, Reckitt in building 30 iconic brands. We looked at the consumers in the context of their culture and created new frameworks for India. We demystified digital marketing and blended it holistically with classical marketing to serve this evolving consumer. All in all, Pragmatism is a comprehensive, step by step marketing guide to help you win with the complex DC consumer. Check it out.
All right, so here's how we're going to run this session. The first 20 minutes essentially are going to be Arvind talking about the topic at hand, which is about creating big ideas, winning big ideas, and then we're going to do a Q&A with him post that on some of these ideas, some of the other things that he's talked about in this book, and overall on marketing, right? All right, so Arvind, over to you.
Okay, hello, Varun. Thanks a lot. Hello to everybody. It's great to be with you all. It's a pity it's virtual. I prefer to be in real, but unfortunately, that's how things are. So we'll try and make the most of it. So my session, I want to keep it as sort of, let me talk through it rather than present in a formal way. And I think Varun is going to help put that together with questions. So please feel free to type in your questions and be in conversation. I can see the chat, so I'll look at it simultaneously. Now, what I will try and do in the next 20 minutes is, through my experience of having worked on quite a few brands and my wife's, which is what Varun referred to, I'll try and explain to you what really goes behind making a great big idea, which then goes to make a great communication, which all of you, I'm very sure, are excited to know, because that goes towards making that great TV commercial or great digital assets, which helps brand win with consumers. So what I thought I'll share with you, what you won't find in the books, but which marketers use in real life. And some tools they do, some tools they actually learn heuristically from doing things, and they get to refine the tool. And I'll try and explain what really goes on in a marketeer's head. So when you come to work, you almost come to work as though you had worked for 20 years, which is not often the case. So I'm just going to present a few very simple slides, and I wanted to focus on what I'm saying. The first thing that you must do is really, the art of communication is a bit of, and I'll toggle between one or two slides in my face, there is a bit of science to it, and there is a fair amount of art to it. And it's a combination of these two things which makes a great creative. It's important to do this process in rigor on both sides, and good marketeers have the ability to put on a creative hat as well as a research hat. And I'm going to cover probably in the first part of my 7-8 minutes on what is the rigor that you need to understand, and the following that I will try and explain to you what you need to look out for. When you get into communication, you need to have an understanding of consumer insight, which I think some of you may have covered through previous sessions. I'll not cover that, but it's important to bear that in mind. Now, when you get into a communication, typically, the first thing you must look at, and these are important to identify, and I'm actually sort of calling this out very clearly, very simplistically, so you capture these words. You need to call out the business objective, the marketing objective, and the communication objective. If you confuse these three things, then you will have a very gobbled up piece of communication, and you will lack the clarity that is required in making a great big idea. Now, let me start with what is the business objective. Now, all of you, when you join the company, will probably be sitting at, if you're lucky, in the middle or on the latter side, which is the communication objective. You may not have the side of the business objective, because that is largely driven by seniors and leaders who really drive the company's agenda. But what you must be clearly conscious of is that you have to start first with the business objective, which basically goes to show what is the business that you are in trying to achieve. It is the intention of the firm to capitalize on the outside opportunities with its internal resources to generate value for consumers. Okay, that's what a business is all about, right? Simply put, we try and look at the environment, we look at ourselves, and we try and see what can we do in conjunction, which is what the outside has to offer and what we have to put our business in the context of the market. So a typical business objective could look like, we want to earn a certain amount of revenue or a certain turnover by looking at the market of, let's say if you're in TVs, by looking at the market of durables. You could define the segment. You could say plasma, you could see LEDs. If you are in the space of, let's say if it's Logitech, then you could say I'm looking at computer terminals. I'm looking at that market of accessories, which is going to be very relevant now with work from home coming up. And I need to generate a certain amount of revenue, because a business manager and an entrepreneur always has an output in mind. Now, that's what the business objective is all about. Be very clear what you want to get. Now, in companies that you work for, you may be, as I said, further downstream, but you need to understand what is the company trying to achieve through this particular initiative that is at your hand, typically with the brand. So it is to say that this company is trying to achieve something in a certain market context. That is the firm's outlook, okay, business objective. Spell it out very clearly. We want to achieve so much revenue by exploiting a market segment in a certain time frame. Now, when you get to the next stage, you come to what is called the marketing objective. In marketing, remember, you always talk about, good marketeers, no matter what they do, will always talk about the consumer, right? And when you talk about the consumer, the one thing that you must remember, and often marketing is a lot about distillation. I keep telling my peers and reportees that marketing is not about knowing a lot. Marketing is about knowing what matters. And so you must be very clear that the first starting point of marketing is the consumer, and the second point that you look at is the need satisfaction. Which consumer are you talking to, and what is the need that you're satisfying is the paramount part of the marketing objective. So if I go back to my firm's objective and I want to generate a certain amount of revenue by being in the market, then my marketing objective is to satisfy the consumer, and you can identify the consumer if that is known to you, by fulfilling the need for communication, or if it is personal computers, by fulfilling the need for easy computing from home. So you talk about a consumer and you talk about the need you want to fulfill. Okay, so from the firm's objective of generating revenue, you come to what you want to do with the consumer and the need you fulfill. And from there, you come to communication objective. And communication objective is always stated in terms of what change you want to bring about in the consumer. Okay, so you have the consumer, you know him from his need state. Now you're talking to him to impact him. And communication objective is typically stated in terms of either creating awareness about a product or changing a behavior which is in favor of your category, so that adoption happens and purchase happens. So in a sense, communication objective closes the loop of this entire gamut, right? So it's very important that you understand these three differences. When you write a brief, or if you're not writing a brief, jot this down on a piece of paper and be clear that your firm is into making revenue through fulfilling a certain consumer need of a consumer who you identify in various ways by either creating awareness of the product or by changing behavior which enables them to adopt your product. So these three must be very clear to you. I expect all the marketers out there of tomorrow to understand this difference, because if you're clear about this, then when you go to do the subsequent steps of communication, you'll be a lot more clear. The next step I want to highlight is that when you write a communication brief, and companies have various formats, I've worked in 4 or 5, and so has my wife, and we pulled out the essence of a good communication brief. And do not shortchange this process. If it takes time with a larger group, then make sure you write it out separately, scribble the notes, and depending on the place you work on, every place has a format, a template, but you must cover these aspects. The first aspect is the market landscape. Understand very clearly which market are you looking at. When you look at a market, an entrepreneur or a brand manager will always be clear that he's looking for an opportunity. So if you are looking at a market and saying there is no opportunity, then you're in the wrong space. But if you think there is a market, then you identify the market in terms of an opportunity. So if I'm selling Dettol soap, I would write the market landscape like, and this one I know from experience because Dettol was earlier in the liquids category, which you guys know, in protection. And then they said the same benefit of protection can go into soap wash. So they defined the market landscape as one where washing is important, but the quality of washing to be able to kill the germs was not sufficiently exploited, and therefore consumers or the market could take another brand like Dettol to take care of washing plus killing the germs. So when you write the market landscape, you're looking for the gap. Remember, identify this very clearly. If the market landscape is not clearly written with respect to competition, with respect to what the opportunity is, then you'll have a problem. The second step is be very clear that the market landscape offers a view into the brand opportunity. If the brand opportunity is not there, the market landscape is either poorly spoken of, or the brand reason to exist is not understood. So if you have a gap in the market, saying there is a gap that I see, as I said in the Dettol case, there's a case for washing, but there's not enough case for protection. or a good washing which kills the germs, then the brand opportunity is to come into that particular space. And from that comes the communication task. So if you have the market, you know the gap and you know where the brand is fitting in, then your communication task, as I said, and I'm simplifying things so we're very clear. Either to spread awareness of this opportunity so consumers know about it. Sometimes spreading awareness will require you to spell out what the problem is and spell out the solution. Or you say, look, people know the issue. The brand has been around for a while. I need to emphasize that you need to try it out. So either it is spreading awareness or it is causing people to adopt the category by giving reasons of why they should try it now. Now, the following two things that follow from there is something that all of you may be familiar with, is to spell out the opportunity of the brand from a function as well as an emotion perspective. And when I come to the next point, brand essence, this will get clear. But a brand exists very clearly apart from a commodity because it not only fulfills a function, but it also gives an emotional assurance. Brands are, remember, those which give you loyalty beyond reason, right? That's what brands are all about. So unless you touch an emotional chord of the consumer along with the function need that you're satisfying, you are not creating a brand at all. And therefore, it is important to spell out functional and emotional reason. To go back to the Dettol example, the functional reason is that it kills the germs. Emotional reason is it gives you the assurance, therefore you can live happily through your life. If it is the mother you're talking about, then she can be assured about the child's protection, and therefore you can let him indulge all that he wants to. So the benefit that a brand brings in is to give the child a confidence. Look at the Colgate ring of confidence. What does it tell you? It tells you that an early morning brush actually takes care of all dental problems, and you can bite through and have a good, great day without bothering about anything, from sweets to so on and so forth. So the emotional ring is very important because it identifies what the brand does for you at the level of your general well-being. Brands which do not spell out an emotional reason have the very strong risk of staying like a commodity or falling into one because they haven't told the larger story of what it will do to the consumer's life. The last point is brand essence. And brand essence is very important because brand essence kind of stitches up the top 4 or 5. Now, brand essence is a full sort of chapter by itself, but what the brand essence does for you is it tells you, A, what the brand is, and B, how it enables the consumer. So when a good brand essence is written, let me give you the example of Google. Google's brand essence is to help the world simplify information. Now, this is a very well-written brand essence, and the reason I quote that often, and some of the Western ones, or let's take closer home, which I've been talking a lot about, is Fab India, which is celebrating India. What these do is actually they bring together, if you look at these wordings, they bring about not only the benefit that will accrue to the consumer by the adoption of the brand, but they also tell you what the firm is good at. So if it's a Fab India celebrating India, then it tells you that you will celebrate India because we will give you stuff that is truly up the social and cultural fabric of India. And it also allows you to feel that particular emotion. So brand essence is where the opportunity of the brand and the need of the consumer in respect of the emotion gets nailed. And if the brand is right at the fulcrum of the opportunity and the satisfaction that follows, then it is well written. If not, then either the communication has to be rewritten from the top, or in some cases, if the brand is not finely edged, you have to rewrite the brand essence. But brand essence is where the roads merge. So it's very important to get this right, okay? And then we come to big idea and creative expression. Now, I have 20 minutes for that part, so I'm going to do this, and then maybe I can take questions and explain this in detail, but I want to be very clear that the structure is understood. Now, what is a big idea? Big idea is the leap you take from a brand essence. Like you have a brand idea, and now you're getting into the space of talking to the consumer. Remember, talking to the consumer is something which happens in very little time because of the clutter in the environment, as well as the time that consumers can dedicate. So big idea is a lot about chiseling what really matters to consumer, and taking out the redundant stuff which does not matter or which smacks of the manufacturers or company's internal concerns. Okay, so there are many examples of big idea. I'm going to read a few out to you. Amazon's big idea is written as a place where people can come and discover anything to buy. So as I said, a big idea is actually written with the sense that it's talking to consumers directly, but it has a bit of the flavor of what the company is doing. A place where people can come and discover anything to buy tells you that people will really benefit, but the place is what Amazon will create. Okay, Nike brings inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world, inspired by, of course, the Nike's founder's line was, "If you have a body, you're an athlete." Now, this one tells you very simply, brings inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Uh, so it is talking to the consumer, yet it's a bit inward looking, because it is telling you how you will talk to them. So when you come to the next step, creative expression, it's going to be all consumer, but at the level of the big idea, you are talking a bit internally, because big idea is supposed to inspire the creative agency as well as the team that is working on the account to create that wonderful line which we often see as advertising taglines. So big idea must have the power to recharge people, to excite them, and to create something which is really up consumers speak. Uh, eBay provides a global online marketplace where practically anyone can trade practically anything, enabling economic opportunity around the world. It's a little long, I thought, for my personal liking, but it tells you very clearly what it is meant to be. If I come closer home, then I like the one that Parachute has done, which is gives everyone a chance to groom beyond themselves. A very good example. It's a bit like a Gillette, which says the best a man can get, and this is telling you that you can groom beyond yourself. And there's also gives everyone a chance. So the gives everyone a chance is an opportunity, and groom beyond themselves is the benefit that accrues from it. So good big ideas are written such that they conclude the preceding steps, they inspire the people within, and they have the germ of the idea which allows you to express it for the consumer in the creative expression. Now let me come to creative expression. Creative expressions are, of course, it's a long game plan. You often see creative expression in the advertising taglines. I think I don't have to tell you there are many of them around the country, around the world. There's so many. If you just recall some of them, you will know what I'm talking about. But creative expression is that particular thing. It can be as simple as "Thanda matlab Coca-Cola," right? Which actually tells you immediately how it owns the category benefit. If you look at Boost, the secret of my energy, these things have stood out. These are very recallable ad lines because they're simple, they're written in consumer speak, they often pick up the local metaphor, and they have a resonance that can actually go running up and down the street. Especially for mass marketers, it's very important to take local vocabulary in consideration. So creative expression will follow from big idea and speaks to consumer very directly. uh, Sometimes, and creative expression is a bit of a science and an art, because you have to have the understanding of the consumer psyche, and you've got to also express it. One of the ones that is my favorite is on the Sprite, which says "clear hair." Now clear hair is an interesting one, which refers to the product, because it is a clear lemon category. It takes a pot shot at the cola category, and Sprite today is actually the biggest single brand, bigger than the cola category, bigger than the cola brands. And this one has a double play on what the category is all about, so there is no chance of losing what you're alluding to, as also makes a point about the emotional benefit of getting clarity. Now, of course, these things are very nuanced, which means the benefit is not really meant to be a pure benefit. It's meant to be a round-up overall benefit with a bit of tongue-in-cheek sort of expression. But it works well, it expresses the idea, and of course, consumers love it. Sometimes the creative expression can go very much in the face of the consumer. The Tata Tea Jagore campaign, which initially started off very well, got a bit extreme towards the latter part. If you guys are familiar, I could show examples, but they take longer. But there was one point where they went against child infanticide, women infanticide in the country, and they went really very hard on the treatment. At one point, Cadbury's went very hard on the treatment. Today, the Tayari Jeet Ki potentially runs the risk of becoming so hard that it loses some of its brand essence. Brand essence is about empowering the consumer, but if it puts the consumer a bit at unease because there's too much sweat and toil, then it could work against them. So creative expressions have to be very deftly put together. They have to spell out the consumer need, just to sort of tease him out, yet not lose the essence of the brand, and yet not draw him out so much that he starts to potentially over time even get put off, as I mentioned with I believe the Cadbury's proposition could do to the category. Now, what we put together in the book, and this I've just put out, is we had a look at all our creatives that have been in the country. And we said, is there a commonality in the TV creatives? Are people doing something consciously or subconsciously which is working for some? And if you are a brand manager tomorrow, do you need to be aware of a few creative leaps? So now this is completely creative. It's like saying, if I want to design a Vincent van Gogh painting, or if I want to do a Da Vinci, is there a method to that? And we sort of pulled out, and we got a classification of what appeals to consumers in India specifically. And we put these, we figured they will belong to one or two of these subtypes, and we've given them funny names so people can actually remember some of them. I'm calling out some. I'll explain maybe 3 or 4, and the balance you can refer to. Twisters, queerness quotient, exaggerators, jingly tunes, cause hunters, emotional teasers, cheeky counters, cute capers, functional bashers. Now, we put them out. We believe most ads fall into these. And if you are a brand manager, and this is something I put out for all my brand manager friends, and you want to kind of assess, do I have a chance to make it big with the creative that really rocks the world? Or is my creative lukewarm because it does not have that punch? Then here is, I believe, a look at the history of creatives to know, is mine having one or two of these things which have clicked in the past? Now, let me give a quick example. When I say twisters, I mean an advertisement where you do something which puts a bit of a twist at the end. See, a good storytelling involves a surprise ending. All of us watch films and serials and so on, and we like things which have a bit of a twist. Advertising really relies on this technique a lot, and you see a comeback, which is what is the word often used by advertising agencies, which depend on a twist in the tail. And the twist in the tail actually makes it sticky, makes the consumer remember it, gets them involved, and therefore, when the involvement is high, the creative sticks. Some of you, let me give you 2 examples. There was a commercial that some of you may be aware, which was very, very famous for a long time, One Coffee Please, where there's a lady sitting in a coffee parlor, and there's a man sitting on the other side, and he's trying to kind of impress her. And then she orders a coffee. She kind of motions, and he thinks that she's calling him. When she goes over, she says, "One coffee, please." And actually, she takes him as a waiter. This creative had one of the highest recall for at least a decade. The other one that I want to talk about is a little bit down, but I was surprised, and so was Trupti, when we were in our marketing years, as to how long creatives like this one. This one was Ericsson, and the other one was Cadbury's, where there's a girl who is watching a match of the boyfriend who hits a ball across the boundary for a 6. She gets up and does a very spontaneous jig, and then the Cadbury lilt follows. This ad was recalled as the best creative for, I would not be surprised if even today in middle-age group, this is called as the most creative ad. So you need a bit of a twist in the tail, and that really helps. Closer to the times that we are living in, Dimaki Batti Jala De is a very interesting idea where, with a clever sort of twist at the end, you get a lot of consumer response. Advertisers do rely on raising the queerness. If you tell a story plainly, it's a bit like our real lives, where if we say something plainly, then we don't excite people. But if we say something with a bit of spelling out one aspect of a story, then we tend to catch attention. There was a campaign that the Vodafone guys put on the Zuzus, where they turned people into small little pygmies, and they were also trolled. By that time, the social media was not so big, but people didn't like the way they were taken. But that particular queerness, which was really high, got the ads to be extremely, extremely visible. And of course, once they got that particular creative element in place, they could tell their story with the brand. Exaggerators, I mean, of course, you guys know Fevicol, one of the finest brands in India, which has been created purely and purely out of exaggerating a point of view, which consumers accept because it's a tongue-in-cheek humor. And in a category where you expect very little resonance with everyone, because Fevikwik is not something you use every day. It's not even life-saving, but it is actually the most recalled commercial. That's an example of exaggerating. But exaggeration must be done with the right humor. If not, then people might actually not believe your proposition, and that may impact the brand credibility. Jingly Tunes. A lot of the creative brands in our country have been built on a strong jingle. And the Tata Sonata, which you guys are familiar with, or the Maggie jingle are the best examples. These actually work at a subliminal level, and they remind you of the brand. And in a very quick sort of duration, they can actually spell out wonders for the brand. But you need consistency, you need a good track. You need a track which has a crescendo and a diminuendo. You need to have all those features in place, and you can actually create wonders. Jingle is a favorite of many people. Hero Honda relies that on a lot also. Cause hunters. And I think after this, probably I will ask, because I'll not take all the examples. I'm just giving you a flavor of what we can do. In cause hunters, The example is the Tata tea. You know, we are walking into a time, and I think I've discussed this in the following chapters, that we are moving to a time where cause marketing is going to be very big. Consumers are increasingly asking questions on procurement, and asking the questions of sourcing, on sustainability, and brands which take up the larger cause of the planet, the people, have a very good chance. Tata Tea is a good example again of how they've actually built the brand on cause of the society. Idea, which talks about various things that you can do with the dissemination of a message via the infrastructure of the telephony, is again a good example. So cause hunters will go a long way, but you have to stitch it well to the brand, its promise. It should be in sync with what the brand has to promise, and the brand should not fall flat, because the causes are big. The brand servicing is often small, so you got to pitch it right. Emotional teasers are very important. I think if you touch the emotional chord, you can go places with consumers. So I'll not detail this. You may be able to understand some of these. Cheeky counters. You know, a lot of the times the Pepsi and the Coke commercials in the past, and I think we're moving to a time where it will happen soon between Airtel and VI and so on. When you take on a competition, then not only do you kind of make the consumer choose between two possible competitors, but you also heighten the noise in the category and increase market for both players. Intuitively, you don't feel like doing counters, but sometimes if the situation is such that market shares are close by, which will be identified in your previous form that I discussed, then it may be worthwhile. I mean, Sprite is actually an anti-cola strategy, right? 7-Up was built up as an uncola brand. So cheeky counters which take a dig at the competition in a roundabout way, speak to consumer in his existing mindset, actually can go a long way, because they have the advantage of striking relevance in one shot. Especially for people who come in late in the category, for Me Too's and so on, cheeky counters work very well. Cute capers. In this country, cuteness of the kids is actually very important. There's a brand of Maruti which was built purely on the cuteness question. When a child wraps up a commercial saying, "Isme petrol khatam nahi honda hai," which means the petrol does not get over. And that cuteness won such a overwhelming response from consumers that the recall was high. I had a senior from work previous to my existing job. He used to say that if you want people to really vibe with your commercial, then show either a cute dog or a child, and you really get the empathy flowing. It really does work. Cuteness of kids, cuteness of whatever the situation, which actually also implies innocence, gets the consumer on your side, gets their emotional juices flowing, and kind of drops their guard, so your brand message can flow in. There is a bit of psychology there. Functional bashers. Look, functional bashers, I believe there's a dime a dozen. A brand which comes and screams its proposition. I think Dettol is doing that a lot these days. They work well to get the brand up. The recall is high. They somewhere lose out on the emotional benefit, but if it's done cleverly, then you can actually go quite far. Sana, can you help me go back to the face? So this is how it is. I just thought I'll take you through a few. You may ask, when you're done with all this, how do you feel if the ad is done well? And I put these down as indicators of, and I'll take this very quickly before I go to Varun again. If your ad has made an impact, this is a technique that is used by some agency people. If it is negative, consumers turn against, and sometimes that can happen. If it is a brand message is negative or very abrasive, then you have a problem and you need to recast. If the advert is played out but consumers are indifferent, brand metrics don't follow up, you have a task and you need to go diagnose, look at your brief, look at your response and try and fit it. It's only when the latter three happen, which is stimulating, change agent, and contagious, is where brands start to tick. And if I had to do a graph of this versus the brand response, the contagious part is where brand cult is built, or as we call the cult brands, where not only are you able to change the consumer towards what you're saying, but you're also able to strike a conversation where consumers become your evangelists, you step back, and they take over the brand. So these are sort of 5 things to remember to evaluate your ad. If you get your brand coming in the top 3, this cause for concern. If you get the consumer to respond in the following 2, then you have a right to celebrate. Until you sharpen your skill to come in the latter part, you're not really doing a good job. So my request to all of you marketeers is to keep this in mind and really work on your creative so you can create a solid impact. Okay, that was a broad summary of how you make a good communication. So Varun, I finished my first 25 minutes.
Okay, awesome. Lots of interesting questions that have come in.
Okay.
There's a question there around. There's a question from Prashant on MSMEs, which I'm going to rephrase a little bit, and I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
When it comes to small brands competing with massively larger brands, like is there some additional aspects that they need to sort of consider in, or does the process remain absolutely the same as when you're operating with a large brand?
No, it's a very relevant question. I get asked this question often. The task of a mass marketer and the task of a brand which is in the space you mentioned could differ. If you're a mass marketer with a leadership role, yes, you take the leadership position, you change behavior. And if you're following up as a smaller player, then you need to be specific about your proposition, is because chances are your first consumers will come from the market leader, and therefore your proposition has to be spelt right. However, what is common to both of them is that you're addressing a consumer need. But people who coming in later are actually only identifying their need either as a sub-segment of the main need, or they're setting up a new emerging need which the main guy has not noticed. So my request to you would be, in a case like this is a question which spans beyond communication. You need to look at your proposition. What exactly are you offering which is differentiated? And you have to emphasize the differentiation repeatedly. And my request to you would be to choose a factor which makes you superior to competition. And the reason I'm saying that is that even if you're a challenger brand, it is important that you are understood. You may not say it explicitly that you are challenging, but it's important that you get in the consumer's shoes and say something which helps them evaluate your brand vis-a-vis the existing brand, which you can assume is there. The 7-Up Uncola drink is actually an example of where they took the acknowledgement of the fact that that the consumer would come from the cola category, and here was something they were offering as a differentiation. The other reason that is important is from a psychological angle, is when you state your proposition very sharply and very differently, you're actually creating not only a sub-segment, you're creating a category. Because in a segment, there are actually many categories operating. Depending on the manufacturer's confidence in proposition, he can start to create niches for himself. So if you take a benefit and you keep talking about them, you give the sense to consumer that you've got a proposition which the main leader does not have because he has too many benefits. To give you a small example, often in very cluttered space of the MFD, if everybody's talking about growth and somebody comes and talks about stamina, which boosts it so well, then they could cut the market and get somebody only basis that single proposition. Consumers felt it was not a sub-segment of the MFD, it was actually a new category, which was useful for sports. And so my request to the MSMEs is to identify a proposition and not fall for the temptation of saying many things, because the many things will probably be owned by the market leader. Take that, hammer it hard, hammer it repeatedly, efficiently, use the right communication, use the right media channels, and almost recast the category in a sense where it is relevant from your perspective. And then who knows, in 5 years' time, the market leader follows you and you become the leader, because the markets are always evolving. Okay, today, to give you a small example, the mothers of kids in India are looking for nutrition which helps them rewire their brain solidly, right? And so if people coming in with a strong story for brain development have a good opportunity, because the times we are living in, a lot of stress is leading on cognitive development. And if somebody does that, and I'm seeing it happen with few challenging players in the West, they're actually dialing up the whole category, saying enough growth, time to look at the brain. Okay, so my request to you would be, take a proposition, really emphasize it, and almost imagine that in a few years you can convert the category and you become the driving need in that category, not the leader. But if you make the mistake of following and saying everything else, then consumers will wonder, why should I take this when I have enough of this from the main guy? And he'll always have more might in the advertising space as well as the market. Okay.
Fair. It's a good point. And Arvind, in your book you've also spoken about these certain categories where everyone seems to be speaking about the same benefit. So you took the example of phones, where the camera is what every brand wants to talk about, whether it's iPhone or whether it's Xiaomi. So in that sense, when you're operating in a category where there are, let's say, one key benefit, or at best two, but basically one or two things that consumers really care for, is the role of the big idea then to sort of frame it in a slightly more emotionally relevant context, or is the brand builder now going to go in search of differentiation and talk about a third benefit, even if the consumers are essentially caring about those one or two benefits?
See, the big idea, Varun, I would recommend does not change a lot. The creative expression can. Now, in the case of the phones, for instance, what happens is in highly saturated categories with a lot of segmentation and noise, the market keeps getting recut. And what are the benefits today will become the hygiene of tomorrow. Now, nobody is going to talk about features of the phone which Nokia began with, which is you have languages, you have various functionalities. Those are taken for granted. And today, a smartphone does everything for everybody. And anyway, now it's the hardware and the software is the app. So what are we talking about? And the whole conversation is shifted to phones. So I think manufacturers who are in this space, to answer your question, will have to have the uncanny ability of seeing the future needs evolve and try and capture that. So it will take a bit of market gazing, a bit of your own competence. So that's the part about the brand essence as to what do you see as the opportunity in the market, what you're going to offer to make that opportunity happen, how that converts into an emotional benefit for the consumer. They'll have to keep a watch on that because a category like that evolves constantly. But the big idea may not change in a hurry because the big idea is often spelled in terms of an emotional benefit. The way you satisfy the emotional benefit can change, but the payout may still be the same. I would request that the creative expression is modified from time to time, especially with digital, you can do that. But don't change the big idea because the big idea is often linked to a core brand essence, and that should stay consistent. The creative expression, the innovation, the features that you call out, they can change. Because also remember, if you want to change 6 months or 1 year hence for something else, then you need to have a pivot around which you keep changing, and people are clear about what is consistent and what is changing. But if everything is changed, then when you reappear, then there will be no continuity from the previous proposition. So it's important to segregate big idea as the idea which truly reflects the positioning of the brand essence, with all those features included, and then keep modifying the creative expression now and then. So people know what's coming on, but they understand that the core of the brand is still the same. I mean, Heineken, that star tells you the beer brand as to what it is about to all the consumers. And then it has many versions, like, or a Miller's Light and so on and so forth. So people know what the variants are, they know what is the specific proposition, but they must also appreciate what is the basic need you're addressing. And therefore, the big idea should not change unless there is a dramatic change in the whole environment and the market swings completely and you are pegged to a product benefit. Then you have to reevaluate it. But if the big idea is sufficiently spelled out with consumer need in mind and a functional and an emotional reason, I mean, today, think about it, Coke still opens the most generic emotion of happiness and does it all right. And they've launched, they launched new Coke, as a disaster, but they managed to play on that. Pepsi still has many taglines, but it speaks to the young people. That's their big idea inherently, which you'll never see because it's written behind the expression. But your core consumer and the core need, and that's why it's important for young brand managers and people in marketing to work with their with their partners and with the seniors to figure out what is the core benefit, what is the core need, and what is the functional and the emotional reason, especially emotional, because you're into brands that you're satisfying, which you always tenaciously and consistently stick to, because that's what makes a brand. And if you're flipping, then probably you're making a mistake. Time to go back to the drawing board. Recut that, and then recut your creative expression to make sure the core is well understood.
Fair enough. Now you talked you mentioned very briefly about the advent of digital. One of the enduring aspects of digital has become the 6-second advertisement, whether it's a YouTube pre-roll or an Instagram ad. How do you square off the classical principles of emotional brand building versus the reality that consumers don't want to watch ads beyond 6 seconds?
Sure. See, I think, and it's an important cusp of change that new marketers have to be aware about. And my request to new marketers, because I'm speaking to more of those, I've had sessions with older marketers also, to understand both will exist. The classical marketing was a bit closer to consumer in the sense of understanding universal needs. The digital marketing will be closer to consumers because they will understand individual needs. But they are interlinked. The universal need is to be satisfied with good food when you're hungry, the way Domino's has built itself. A digital consumer is saying, when I'm just come back from office, I don't have time. and I need to snack on something now. I need that solution. And that's where the digital marketing is talking. Now, they are both relevant, okay? People in the future the best marketers will be those who understand both classical marketing as well as digital marketing. Classical marketing excels at, again, understanding the need of the consumer, the brand proposition, and really spelling it out well. And digital marketing specializes in intimate one-to-one conversations with consumers across various media platforms with specific creatives that are built for their particular need. But they still need to belong to a larger brand idea, because brands have stature from very large usage. I mean, look at it. Why is Facebook and Instagram such a rage? Now, these are slightly anomalous examples because they're led by technology. But fundamentally, what is at work is that they are universally a platform to everybody to operate in a certain way. I mean, a Facebook has a certain way, a WhatsApp has a certain way, and Instagram has a certain way. It's spelled out, from the look, the graphic, the messaging, and so on. But it's at the same time also allowing you to express yourself in a way which is very unique. So it's an amazing combination of a universal platform and an enablement and a particular empowerment and an expression. And this is the climax of a brand where you get the community participation of everybody, because you've satisfied a universal need with a universal platform. Yet you've given everybody a platform to express themselves on. So not only can they speak what they feel, but they speak to a large community, because as human beings, we need to express ourselves, right? That's what Maslow says. But what is expression without a hearing audience? So it's a bit of a paradox that we want to tell who we are, but we also want to tell to a large number of people. So the classical marketing addresses the universal need and tells you what you need to know for a marketer to be able to be relevant to many, many people. Because hunger, thirst, social security, emotional benefit, and the 10 or 12 emotions that I've described in my book, and I still feel a lot of them are not well leveraged, are the ones a marketer has to be clear about. And once he's clear about that, then he can go and talk to Arvind Bhandari and Varun Setia with his context, his time, his mood, his psychographics, whatever they may be, and tell that, look, this is the answer you need, and the benefit you get is a bit universal. So the journey of classical marketing starts at the widest funnel, and the conversation of digital marketing is one-to-one. If you don't do the two together, either you lose the scale of a big brand, or you lose the intimacy of a niche or a small brand which has come in digital age. So digital marketers will have to learn the fundamentals of classical marketing. How do you create awareness, interest, decision, action? How do you get that? And then understand those tools, how do they apply in the digital world with respect to the platform, with respect to the occasion. So whether you're going to a chat, or you're going to browse, or so on and so forth, what time of the day you're doing, you need to understand the digital application of the same universal consumer need and apply it well. So to me, classical marketing becomes the why of doing it, and digital marketing becomes the how, which tells you who to speak to, when, in what form. They are not divorced from each other. If they are divorced, then either classical marketing will fail to make an impact at the individual level, or if digital marketing is done without appreciation of classical marketing, then you will not have a brand which is a cult brand or a stature brand, because a cult brand is one that is shared by communities. And unless you know the universal need, you cannot create a brand which is shared by the people at large. Right? So It will have to be a mix of two. It will be a challenging time for all new marketeers. That's my bit of sympathy. But it's also very exciting because the people who are watching and listening closely can do wonders, which was not possible before. Earlier, you really depended upon one mega communication blockbuster film. If you got right, good. If not, then you're doomed. Today, you can actually build up from piece to piece and really make a big brand. So it'll be a mix of both, Varun. And I've given many frameworks on where you stand with respect to the brand in its product life cycle, in its affiliation with the consumers, and accordingly, walk the waters very carefully, choosing the right digital techniques. But classical marketing is important because classical marketing is pivoted on universal need satisfaction, and the emotional satisfaction.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, in Kraftshala, we often talk about the fact that, once you understand the classical marketing process, the digital tools just enhance capabilities in a substantial way. So you can do a lot more, but the process and the flow is still pretty much the same. People are still going to respond to you much better if they like you. And that likability is built through slightly more subtler ideas than necessarily Mahabachat and so on and so forth.
Also, that one, just a small example, just to highlight my point. Sometimes be open to also innovating. I mean, let me give you an example. Parachute is a brand that is a coconut oil for everybody who's looking at grooming. For years, they've run this campaign. They still do it. Champi karo, and wash your hair, and you've got taken care of your. Now, today, after the consumer insight, and I know this personally, they figured that the lady of today is in a very different space. Her time is less, and in certain situations, she needs a response right now. So, Live On Serum, which has actually been launched by Marico, looks at women in different points of time and gives them solutions. So it's the same product, and they've typified the girls in 6 to 7 subtypes. So whether you're going to a party, you just walk into office after a ride on the scooty and your hair is ruffled up, that level of detail. And they serve them content, and they serve them particular creatives which specifically appeal to those people using digital marketing techniques. And that's a lovely example of understanding the consumer, developing a product and talking to them. But remember, if you're a parachute marketer, you are actually talking about grooming, and parachute marketers understand grooming very well. So you have the understanding of the grooming, of looking good, and then you fine tune it with the times and with the proposition, and you have an amazing combination. Live On is doing very well, but it can only come from a company which knows the parachute and grooming. You understand? So be open to also innovating with respect to your brand and new opportunities.
Okay, this is Virender. He wanted to know a lot about CRED. So CRED is the defining campaign of the last 1 month. And if I were to ask you a slightly broader question, I mean, I'd love for you to give your thoughts here as well. But when you're essentially coming up with a product, doing something that hasn't, that there isn't an obvious alternative for, what role does communication play? Is that in any way relevant to the way that they've gone about this particular campaign?
Okay, it's an interesting point, and this is a question I've also asked myself. Look, there are two challenges in marketing always. One is to get the attention of consumers, because there are just too many brands out there, and your time is short. And especially if you're coming in late and your proposition is new, then there's always a struggle. The second point is about telling a point well about your offer, which gets awareness as well as usage up. Okay, so I don't have data on what is done to CRED, and I'll have to probably find this out, and then maybe I have my judgment. What they've done very well is they've actually managed to call out something which would have not probably had the same response if it was done a little plainly. Of course, there is a lot of muscle behind, financial muscle, which is at work, hiring 4 or 5 celebrities, putting a power of media which is unimaginable, and so on. I think if you were to ask me, it's a little gimmicky. But if and I'm not privy to their brand essence or their proposition, if they're trying to say that, look, and I hope that is the case, because then the idea is right. So there are 2 parts to it. One is to use celebrity and to decry them in the same breath, which is the new one. I worked in Pepsi, where we used to make the celebrity smaller than the user. The power was with the real consumer and not with the celebrity, and that worked well. Here, if the deal is that we want to uncomplexify the world and tell you our simple settling of credit card payments and they're trying to take a dig at the previous style. If that is the brand essence and that is the strategy they cling to, then I think it's good, because they are in a way demolishing the old style by taking the celebrities and bashing them in the same breath. So that is a thought. Well done, good, great job. But you have to now again follow up the simplicity of doing this, because it may not be so clear, because the celebrity coming on screen and being bashed does take away some mind space, and the point about simplicity of CRED may not be so visible. But if this is the idea that they want to bash and they're using creative device, then I think they're doing the right job, but they will have to soon follow up on the functional reasons. Today, I think they're a bit blurry to the consumers at large, but they managed to get the awareness and the recall up. Is the salience and relevance the 2 other tasks of the brand? Are they in place? Time will tell. Okay, so some question marks and some points. Do I like the campaign? The one last point is, remember, India likes celebrities. Okay, we are a country that loves celebrity culture. Celebrity bashing may go a little contra to what consumers normally like it. But if you do it consistently, do it well, and if your brand has the power, you can make a difference. If not, you run the risk of actually running foul with consumers. So that is a risk.
Yeah. So this brings me to to the ideas that you've talked about in the book about how the Indian society is a very different society in the West, and you spoke about the collectivism of our society, the fact that we're a deeply religious society, and so on and so forth, right? So in many ways a traditional society, and so a lot of ideas that work supremely well in the West tend to work not so well here. Is that commentary reflective of the of younger India as well, people below the age of 25 or 30, or
Absolutely. Yeah. So, that's a point I've discussed at length, Varun, and I'm also a sociologist apart from a marketeer, so I can talk about this at length. India has a few things which are very, very standout compared to the world, and I've worked outside and I do work on global brands, so I can appreciate that a lot more. But India has a few traits. If I'm just going to call out 3, 4 for your quick consideration, it'll take 5 minutes to understand what I'm talking about. First is Indians love to hierarchize. It is a part of the social fabric because we grew up in a society where there was a caste system at 4 levels. And so whether we are talking about mango is the fruit, is the king of the fruits, lion is the king of the forest, or Shah Rukh Khan is number one, we want to organize our relatively complex world into a hierarchy, and ranking helps us do that, which is why this whole deal in the schools to do well or to rush, the excessive obsession we have on doing well is to be on top of the hierarchy, because that is how the society of India is built up, on caste system. It is a part of a fabric. Now, in the modern times, when some of you move around, you feel that the base is changed, but actually it's not. Today in India, strangely, joint families are still the rule. The matrimonies are still a lot by caste, and arranged marriages are still outnumbering the love marriages. And even the Bharat matrimony kind of sites are actually filtered basis caste and other considerations. What we call them in sociology is not a arranged or a love marriage. It's called a survey marriage. And that's a unique hybrid where you look at your partner with all considerations being all right, and then you make the choice between A and B. Okay, so it's not really a love marriage in that sense. It's actually a well-considered marriage. So Indians love to hierarchize, and they haven't changed. This flows in the fabric of old people, middle-aged people, young people. I can give you various examples. Second part is holism. Indians live in a society. This is actually a bit more true of Africa, where even a community becomes important. But Indians love or relate to themselves not as individuals. It is not Arvind Bhandari. It is not Varun. It is not you worked on Maggie. Maggie is never the lady. In the West, you can inspire. In Germany, you can inspire the Maggie lady by telling her that you can create great recipes, and you appeal to her creative aspect. In India, you'll be flat if you do that, because nobody cares about the creative recipe if it does not go to please the family and the kid in particular. Okay, so Indian consumer is holism. Indian consumer wants to know his situation in the context of the family. A lady is not a lady, she is a mom, a mother-in-law, a wife, and so on. And if you don't talk to her from that mindset, you make no point to her. So be very careful on that front. Third aspect is continuity. Indians have what is called, from a sociological perspective, a circular sense of social change. So in the West, you do well, you get something, that's economic class. In the East, and this is particularly true of India, you do well, you come back to enjoy the benefits. So we have a theory of karma, we have a theory of cycle. We cycle, and of course there are religious nuances to it, but by and large, most religions believe in a payoff system. Now, what it does to us is that when we reason through things, we actually try and reason from a very longish point of view. So our creatives are actually very, very convoluted. They don't. I remember seeing an ad of Close Up which surprised me, which said, "Iske bina zindagi kuch nahi." The life is incomplete, and it's a goddamn toothbrush which just sparkles your teeth. Indians do buy the idea of an exaggerated emotional benefit because they're used to an imagination of a world beyond its functional domain. In some other cultures, it would fall flat. In Indian culture, it acquires a meaning when you talk about a prolonged story, where even consumer is allowed to put his imagination. It works wonderfully because consumers are used to thinking of a world in a very circular, convoluted way. And so storytelling must include a lot of emotion, must include a lot of benefits which flow. That's also the kind of context of the argumentative Indian. we need to put long stories. And so storytelling must be elaborate in India. The North Indian culture is all about that. So remember, continuity is important. And the last point is transcendence. Indians are not fundamentally logical people. Now, car makers have tried here with features like around the world, but Indians are even more driven by emotional considerations. So all the comparisons happen on a sheet and then takes the gut. And so while you make your functional comparisons, make sure the gut or the feeling of the person inside his emotional makeup is well covered. Otherwise, you will just fail to make an impact. The whole Indian bureaucratic structure, the whole Indian political system is actually based on Western models. But deep inside runs the feudal system, the way we patronize, the way we pass around power, the way we actually work with people. These are very fundamental to us. And that is because we are not a very logical society. We are very much at ease going beyond logic. To us, life is well considered when it's a mix of logic, which is why, you have spas which are actually indulgent in nature, but which have a spiritual dimension. Now, which other culture allows you that sort of thing? So I think marketeers should understand the social, and that's my context in the beginning of the book. Please understand, because in MBA, they don't teach about Indian sociology, surprisingly. And therefore, we end up adapting the models of West to India. But why should a population of a few millions drive the need of a billion plus? So it's time to understand our social culture and try to mount narratives which are true of people as we are in the larger space, because brands are eventually a very, very small segment of the social and cultural space we walk in. And the more the brands reflect the social and cultural space we walk in, the better they will be. Now, remember, you don't have to be religious, as has happened recently in some contexts, right? In the Titan case. It's very important to understand the brand and the consumer from a psychological standpoint, from a social cultural standpoint, and not transgress on the religion, because that can be quite inflamed. And that is what marketers have to learn. But if they don't soak themselves into cultural reality, they will never get the consumers vibing with them. So it'll be a tightrope walk. But those who are careful of not touching the religious sensibilities, yet understanding Indians as Indians, and they are secularly a bit like each other, regardless of religion. But you have to understand who they are. So that is the 4 points I talked about. And because of that, Varun, the point I've made is that Indians don't take something from the East and apply it. Indians modify. So it's called in sociology modernization of Indian tradition. Okay. The best example I saw recently when I was driving down is that Jaguar now has a very fancy fitting of a shower, which gives you a bucket or a balti effect. So you put it on and it drops water to you in a torrent, like would happen from a bucket which was hoisted 6 feet above your head. Now, that's an amazing example of using the technology of shower, but giving the Indian, and if you've gone up country India, a lot of people have the habit of downing the water. My parents would do it. So they've actually used that insight to increase the shower experience. This is a very good example of modernization of Indian tradition, where you use the technology, but stitch to the Indian sensibilities. And knowing some of these fundamentals will help you do that, not only with communication, which I referred to, but also with innovation and other propositions.
Yeah, it's, if I were to surmise a little bit about what you're suggesting, you're saying that even if you have a new product, the latest technology being deployed in that, it needs to be presented as a connection between how tradition has essentially connected to the traditions of how people have been in the past as well. Like it's a new way of doing the old things that tends to work better, rather than taking a stand, the old is dead and new is here, and therefore this is how the world will be.
Very good example, Varun, very quickly, because I think this point has to be labored. The nano failure is a failure of one who does not understand Indian society. You see, Indian society is built on social mobility. We are all the time trying to climb to the next ladder. If you ask ourselves, we're trying to be better than our previous generation. And mobility has many dimensions: economic mobility, cultural mobility. When nano ad got made, they showed a man who was looking, a two-wheeler guy who was shifting up to a four-wheeler. So it became a wannabe car, right? And the reason you come to a car is you want to walk away from the two-wheeler owners. And that particular image actually played against an engineering marvel and made it from an engineering marvel into the wannabe car of a two-wheeler. And so when people took it on, the neighbors are probably seeing, okay, you're the guy who used to drive the two-wheeler, now you got a car. It's a bit of a sorry situation where you've done a wannabe climber. But if you have a car with all its glory, the way Maruti came in the market, which talked about the benefit of common mobility for the family, the whole game was different, because you reflected the social style. Here you're reflecting an aspiration very openly, and then who wants to attach to that?
Yeah. So, what of brands that are standing for for more liberal values, hypothetically? So, what of a Dove or a Man company? How do they sort of thread this this needle in terms of wanting to stand for something new, but operating in a society, operating in a country where people are fairly traditional?
Yeah, look, I mean, there is no straight answer to that. If some brands reflect a very universal need, I mean, the iPhones of the world pretty much work around the world, except if the iPhone was made in India, it may have had some functionalities which the current ones don't carry. So if they are like that, then it will go in. But a Fair and Lovely is an example where it's built a market much bigger than, if there was a Dove cream of equivalent kind, because we do celebrate fairness in our country. They've changed the name, but trust me, nothing will change on the ground. Because for it to change the ground, you must have consumers saying, we don't care about fair people. I want to see how many people are willing to marry their daughters off to dark grooms and stuff like that, right? Those kind of changes take a while. Now, brands have to walk that. See, the quality of brands is that they have to be in sync with the community, with the consumer. They also have to be now in sync with the community and the larger posturing. It will become a more difficult task, but it requires you to know the brand, the consumer psyche even more closely. Now, if it turns out, to your question, that there is an unserviced need of the consumer, which is not being fulfilled, then and if your brand proposition from a global standpoint has something of it, then you must recut it, modify it unabashedly for the local consumer, and they just don't carry it like that. So I mean, Dove is a thing that works well around the world because moisturization is an important aspect, right? And they brought that quality into a washing soap. So they've done a bit of a hybrid. In India, if I look at a hybrid like that, the inverter plus an AC, which is coming now, is a good Indian local adaptation, which takes two benefits into a category, collapses them, and you get a wow. Or hair conditioner and a shampoo, again, two benefits into a wow. Or what Parachute is trying now, which is the applicators, which is not only hair grooming but also hair retention. So when you start to look at the Indian consumer closely, then you can take some foreign ideas and you can use two benefits and create something. You don't have to be restrained to the benefit that has come to you. But if the idea is very universal, you can carry it as a sometimes, especially brands which have a lot of global appeal about them. Harley Davidson will work the way it is because it has the echoes of a brand which is globally like that. And if you tamper with something which is local, then you undermine the texture of the brand. So you have to understand what the brand is about. If it is a lot on globalism, then you shouldn't modify it. But if it has enough width to talk about local nuances, like a Benetton, because a Benetton is built on the diversity, then you will benefit. Then you will benefit hugely because you can build the diversity of your proposition within the larger brand idea of a comprehensive diversity. But if the world is about one standard thing, a universal need that transcends borders, then you should retain that. So the short answer is you have to understand the brand and the need it caters to, again, fundamentally. And if it has globalism as a part of it, then keep it definitely. If it allows local reflections, then bring it out and spread it out well. Okay. So it will have to be basis that, I mean, the Indian beer outside celebrates India and they actually play up. The finest whiskey is built on India, where provenance is important. Titan failed to make it with a slim watch because they were talking on technology where Indians had no advantage. And so it got left out on the image. Singapore Airlines had a problem because East was not seen to be the one which is strong on air technology, but they played on a mix of technology and hospitality, which was probably close to East. And that whole case study goes to show how they included the consumer perception, which went against them, as a part of the problem. And it's actually discussed in the chapter Innovation, to make it inclusive and make the proposition relevant to the times, which Titan could not, and therefore Titan Slim Edge, in spite of being the best watch, could not crack it. So you have to understand the brand, the consumer need, the proposition, and then accordingly tailor the proposition. But at all times, you have to test, am I getting more empathy and response with consumer? If yes, then walk that path without fear. If not, then go back and assess what's wrong.
Fair.
So the test is real consumer resonance.
Yeah. Fair enough. Another question from Kritika. Are big ideas meant to break category codes or operate within them?
Big ideas are meant to break the category noise, but they operate within the category if you've chosen the category to be your segment where you'll play. If you decide to break the segment, then the big idea can break both the category codes as well as the segment. It all depends on what marketing. So, Kritika, you have to go back and look at the segmentation for your offer. You're asking a communication question, but it's actually linked to a marketing point. You have to look at the segment you're operating in, and you have to ask yourself, what in the segment are you targeting? And are you willing to make a fresh segment, or are you going to be a me too in the segment? Okay, those are questions and choices that you will have to make. If you make those choices, then this question is answered. If not, then the creative will wag the dog, and that is not right, because creatives are not meant to wag, they're meant to take out the brand proposition. If you have a great big idea, change the brand.
Does any brand aspire to be a me too? I'm sure everyone is trying to be distinctive in some ways. So when can a brand sort of aim to be a me too and actually gain?
I mean, if you go with the classical Al Rice, Jack Trout theory, then in a category you can take two players, which is why Avis came number 2 and stayed and then grew. But the third and the fourth is a problem. So you can be a me too technically, because the consumers from various research have shown they can take about 1 or 2 people. Then beyond that, they start to lose out and they don't recall. Does the brand intend to be me too? Sometimes yes, by business decisions. So if it's a large category, a biscuit is a place where people are always me too, because the category is worth 8 to 10,000 crores. And even if you become a me too, and you have a proposition, you have an opportunity to make yourself a business of 500 crores. And some brands have done it, like the way ITC came and did it. It is linked to your, as I said, business objective. What is the objective? How much revenue do you want to earn? How much time are you willing to put in? Sometimes it is better to be a me too in a large category than to be a new one in a new category, which takes building up, takes financial muscle, takes waiting, and the uncertainties that come with it. So that is the choice. You do make the option of me too in large categories. Now, sometimes what happens is you don't intend to, but you end up becoming a me too. And that, I think, is very common. Now, you think you are the hottest thing, you've got the best proposition, but when you spell out the proposition in a TV creative, you end up looking like everybody else. The suitings industry, the textile industry for a very long time, and I think till date, continues to be the space where everybody is everybody. The only example I know is when Birla brought out a nano fabric which had something differentiated, but they could not differentiate. Tomato ketchup is a category that you, I think, worked on, where you find it very difficult to differentiate. And no matter what you do, you become a me too. So it is not about what marketers think they're doing by their grand imagination and vision, but how consumers are using. And very often consumers will slot you as a me too. And then the price war start to happen, because if you're a me too, then what is the big deal about the brand? So the answer to your question is, look at the consumer, not yourself, when you're answering me too. And secondly, in some cases of the categories, being me too is not bad. And in some cases, if you believe that you can truly differentiate, then don't be a me too, start your new category, which goes back to the previous question Kritika asked. You can make a big idea to serve the category, but make sure the way you're cutting the segment afresh. Like the first guy who talked about phones with camera benefit was making a new category, which others have followed in, right? The whole category got morphed now. But the one who came in was the one who made a new category. Okay, so that big idea can disrupt the category code, but you have to be on top of hearing the consumer. And entrepreneurship is also about taking some risks and taking some well-judged calls. It's a mix of that.
Fair enough. Question then on what is the role of the brand team on the creative expression. Now, I'll contextualize this a little bit more. And in fact, you talked about it as well. 10 years ago, we would have one ad that would go on in the year on a brand, and then that ad would keep playing on TV. Today, the number of creatives that a brand is turning out are tremendously larger. So has the competency expectation from a brand manager also differed now? Are they expected to be more creatively proficient than in the past?
Yeah. It's a very good point, Varun, and I think it's evolving. We have put our point of view, and there may be differences. It's such a fresh space that you may have different point of view. I'm very clear personally, and my wife, and we put this together through a fair amount of research, is let me first answer Ashwija's question. I'll come to your point in a moment. Yours is a little more elaborate. So creative expression, Ashwija, is technically the role of a creative agency. The writing of big idea is done in partnership. but the approval of creative expression will be with the brand manager. So I don't know if you can divorce the two. Operationally, yes, you pass the buck to the other person, but you again take ownership and you run with the ball. So the technical answer is the agency's part. The total holistic answer in real life is that it's a baby of both. Honestly, you got to be happy with what you have because you want to run with it eventually. It's your brand. To your point, Varun, things are changing because what is happening is the number of assets are multiplying. The brand I work on currently, we have 2 TV creatives and 200 digital assets. So now the challenge is twofold. A, to have a unified identity of the brand, and B, to have a multiple identity of the brand which talks to many consumers in their time, space, context. Okay. And therefore, the brand managers in the future will have a more responsible view, in my opinion, along with the creative agencies, because they'll have to do two things. And we've called out this expression in our book called digipetal and digifugal. Now, if you look at a centrifugal from a physics analogy, then what happens in that particular motion is that you have a force which pulls towards the center, and you have a force which pulls to the outside. The outside is fugal, the inside is petal, right? You have the two contradictory tugs, as it were. Now, in the digital space, we believe the marketers will have to understand what is digipetal and what is digifugal. So we modified those words to make this point. You'll have to identify, therefore, in the times to come, because the number of creatives are multiplying, that core part of the brand which does not change. Okay, it will have to be very crisp, very small, very palpable, very tangible. And the other parts of the brand you have to probably let open to consumers, especially as your brand becomes big, because today the number of creatives you do or the social media conversations you have with consumers will require you to be a little more open to consumers' interpretation of your brand. So let me explain this to you. I've seen this I haven't seen very many Indian examples, I'm sorry, but we'll have to see who does it well. Heineken is a brand which did some work, and they realized the core of the brand was not the font Heineken, was actually the star communist symbol, if you recall. There's a communist star at the top of Heineken. They said that is the core. And now they make many, many creatives, and they only put the star. First they put the star, and they put H. Then they put the H away, now they only put the star. And after that, I think they also left the red color as one code. They have spawned innumerable creatives, which speaks to Heineken consumers across the globe, across different age types, across different occasions, and surprisingly, they all look the same. And they all work very sharp with the respective consumers because the digital assets are speaking to you. Now, that's a really good quality of being focused on one or two, but also having the latitude to be expressing yourself in many ways. Yeah. So this is the digipetal part is the star of Heineken, and the digifugal part is the many creative formats for a young man, for an old man, coming back from work, around a pool party, and so on and so forth. And they've got very many creatives around it. So because you've identified the core, you can go and flirt with the various brand manifestations. So what the brand manager has to do, to come back to the marketing toolkit, is they have to identify the core brand assets of a brand. Okay, when I grew up, I knew there were a few things, 3 or 4 things that identified a brand. We may have to choose 1 or 2. It's like today, Facebook is an F and everybody knows it's Facebook. And I think a lot of this is being driven by technology, where identifiable symbols are the ones that are standing out, because in the clutter, they stand out. I think clever marketeers will have to identify not only a symbol, but also to build a few things around it so they become very palpable. They need to tangibilize them. And once they've done that, they should let go of the elements of creative and let other people take charge, their creative agencies, their consumers, and let them play with it. Because the brand will express itself in many ways. We have to be open to it. But so long as it keeps coming back to a idea, then it works. So I explained to you in the context of Heineken with the creative expression, visually speaking, but you can also take it from to the brand essence. For instance, I think, and I'm just throwing an example to you to illustrate my point. Brands have to be clear in the world to come. What do they stand for from a need, benefit, and the emotional payoff? So let me tell you, I think Dettol is not about the liquid or disinfectant. It's about protection. Dettol is about protection. So tomorrow, if protection is the key point, that is the one they need to tangibilize, whether it's through a symbol or through a word or through something. That is what they need to protect. Everything else, in my mind, is digifugu. That understanding of the brand can even allow them to launch a security agency which gives you protection in your home against thieves. Because your core idea is not the format of the liquid or its germicidal. Your core idea is protection. I'm just making a point to explain to you, to be provocative. So brands have to, and it will work well with consumers. They'll have no issue. Because consumers subliminally understand the brand, having seen it and having appreciated its play in them. Okay? They will understand. But if you're not clear about what your core is, then you can go all over the place. So the marketing of the future have to understand what is the core, and keep drilling till you get to the core need and the core benefit, emotionally speaking. I mean, the reason Google can do what they do is because they want to simplify world's information and so on, is because the idea is so simply stated in consumer language that it has many, many versions. And it works well because consumers are taking that benefit from the brand. So in the times to come, digital consumers will have to identify their core idea, tangibilized through a visual element or through a representation, and let everything else run a bit loose, because otherwise they will straitjacket the brand, and they will not let the consumers or creative agencies participate in making the brand very, very rich with other imagery from in various contexts. I hope I made my point. It's a little complex, but that's
it's an important point, and I think it's a point that we'll all sort of take in from this session. This is all the folks, the time that we have for today. I love for a little bit of feedback from you guys. So I've shared my screen, and I'll ask the team to also post up the link there. You can use the QR code if you want. But Arvind, thank you so much for the time. I know this is a tough day for you to take out time in, but I'm deeply appreciative, as all of us are, for you to be able to do it. It's always fascinating talking to you, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion as well.
Oh, very much. I think for a virtual session, it was fairly interactive, so it was amazing. I kept the presentation small so we could have a talk. So it was great, and request some of you who are really looking at the explanation in detail to check out the book Pragmarketism. It's a 2-year work with a lot of thinking and so on. I think you have the link and so on. Check it out. It'll be beneficial because it's 40 years compressed into 300 pages. So it should benefit people.
Awesome. Do check out the book. The link is up there. And do keep coming back every Tuesday for a new session in marketing, guys. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you so much.